That is one of my favorite songs. I have asked Jeff to lead that tonight because we're going to be talking simply about what does that mean. And the truth of the matter is, we just need to sing that song over again. It basically is a sermon all by itself. When we raise our children, one of the things we anticipated and desired was that they would grow up and they would be successful in life. And yet when we say that very phrase, what do we actually mean successful on that? Do we want them to be President of the United States? Are we going to be disappointed if they're not President of the United States? Are they going to have prestige, popularity, wealth and possessions, preeminence and power in whatever realm that they are in? And Jesus set a different standard. We want them to be able to serve in whatever capacity, whatever realm, whatever relationship that they would be. But you know, it's difficult even within church circles. I have been in enough different organizations, including congregations, and there gets to be a power struggle. There gets to be a pride issue. Song leaders. I was telling Sharon about a particular man that he's not a very good teacher, but he wanted to teach. And the elder said, no, you're not going to be able to. And so he got mad and left. And it was all about pride. It was all about arrogance. It was all about himself and not whether he was a good teacher or that. But I've seen it among men that strive to be elders or among preachers that they begin being very popular and doing a lot of meetings, and it just goes to their heads. It's very, very hard to really handle any type of success in our life because it puffs us up. It makes us more prideful than we ought to be. And yet, Jesus said, the greatest among you will be he that serves. So if we wanted our children to grow up to be the greatest among all of the people in the United States, we would want them to serve others. Can you imagine what it was like to be chosen to be one of the apostles? That Jesus oftentimes took them aside to teach them privately, and they would then be allowed to walk with him and to eat with him and to travel with him. They could ask him questions when they didn't understand what was said. And then he gave them power and authority. And they were allowed to cast out demons and do the miraculous signs and to give to others the miraculous ability. But the problem comes is there were 12 of them. And the moment you have more than one, you got a problem. And so what happened was in Matthew 18, they came to Jesus and they said, which one of us is the greatest in the kingdom of God? And then in Mark chapter 9, they had a dispute among themselves. Which one of them was to be the greatest? And then what Jim read for us in Luke chapter 22, they're still arguing about it. This went on for 3 years. And all that they did and all that Jesus said, and there was strife now among them over which one of them would be accounted as the greatest. And then we get to the Lord's Supper. They've been arguing all the way up to Jerusalem over which one of them. Now, you have to picture this. They lagged behind so that Jesus was up ahead out of earshot so they could have this debate about which one of them was going to be greatest. And you can imagine, now they get into this room and they're sitting at a table, a little coffee table like thing, and they would lean up against that, and so their feet were just sticking out in each other's faces. They were dirty. They'd been walking all day. They wore sandals. It's dirt roads. It's not even concrete. And so they had dirty, sweaty feet. And what normally would happen is, whichever was the lowest of the low servants, slaves, they would be given a bowl of water and towels, and they would go and wash all of the feet of the people that had gathered together. But if that is the job for the lowest of the low, and they've been arguing about which one of them was the most important, the greatest of the apostles, there's not one of them that was going to wash the other one's feet. And I just imagine a hush when Jesus got up and went and got a bowl or a basin of water and some towels, and he came back, and it was evident he was going to wash their feet. By the way, he did not perform a religious ceremony where he put clean water on clean feet. What he did was he did a service to those men that had dirty feet, and he actually washed dirty feet. And so whenever this comes up, I don't worry about us gathering together. I expect you to shower at home, so we don't have that problem here. And then you're going to wear shoes and socks. And then you're going to get in your car and you're going to drive down here. And the only walking you've done is in your kitchen and in the garage. And in that little bitty time from the parking lot to in here, you don't have dirty feet. Or if you do, it's not our fault. But we don't need to wash each other's feet. But we do need to serve one another. And so when we talk about that, Jesus said yet again, the greatest one among you, whoever wants to be the chief. Now that's not Indian chief, that's just the greatest one, the person with power and prestige. Let him be your servant. And many, many times, there's two different words. There was the word diakonos, we get the word deacon, and that means servant. I know a lot of men that want to be called deacons, but very few of them want to be called servants. And the same thing with the word minister, that it's the same translation from the same Greek word. And ministers like to put that on their business card. I am the minister for such and such. And I've never seen one yet that said, I am a slave of that congregation. But that really is what that word meant. And whichever one of you is going to be the greatest, let him become a slave unto all of the other people. And so, brethren, we have a good congregation. I was impressed when I visited before I moved here. I've been impressed. Almost every meeting that we have had, the preachers have gone away. They've told me privately and publicly, this is a good congregation of people. They love one another and they serve one another. And so this is a reminder. This is not to tell you something that you're not doing very well. It's just a reminder. This is what we ought to be doing. And we ought to serve one another. When Paul wrote letters, he addressed them, Paul, a slave, a servant of Jesus. When James wrote, he said, James, a servant of Jesus. Jude started his letter, a servant of Jesus. Peter began his, a servant of Jesus. And John began his. Y'all getting something here? Now, they couldn't have done that before the resurrection. Now, they're too busy arguing about which one was greatest. But now, every single one of them takes that as their address of who they are. I am a servant of Jesus. No greater accolade can be given to us than we should be recognized as a servant of Jesus. The Apostle Paul said in Galatians 5, that is one of the commandments. A friend of mine years ago got enamored with that one another phrase. And he went through the New Testament and he was astounded at how many times that little phrase comes up. And if you want to make a long list of how you can serve, this is how we do it. By love, serve one another. And this encompasses all of our obligations. And we then serve Jesus by serving one another. Perhaps you remember when Jesus talked about the great judgment day in Matthew chapter 25. And he said, that you did it unto the least of these, you did it unto me. When you saw them hungry, when you saw them needy, and you assessed and you took care of their needs, that was how you served me. We didn't do it personally. We don't do it personally to Jesus, but we do it to each other. And that is what Jesus recognized as our serving Him. Now, if I'm going to be a servant, there are some things that I'm going to have to do. Number one, you have to make yourself available to serve. You know, that's hard for us. Our lives are just busy. They're busy doing all kinds of things. The favorite book of mine that read many years ago, Tyranny of the Urgent. Everything comes and everything that happens is urgent. And I have to do this now. I have to do this. I have to do this. And pretty soon, all of that is about us and what I have to do that serves my purposes. And pretty soon, I don't have time. But I must stop. Must not fill up my time with my serving myself. I have to be available. Can you imagine if you were a literal slave in the Roman Empire and your master called you and you said, I'm busy? You don't get away with that. And so we do it now because we're not called onto the carpet for it. But we cannot do that. We are called to serve, and the service is done when it is needed, not when it's convenient. I remember both doing it and my children doing that. When I needed something done, wanted them to take out the trash or whatever. Yes, we all learned to say yes. We never said, no, I'm not going to do that. The consequence is too great for that. But you could say yes and then just not do it. But then the consequences got great for that too. And so we are not allowed to do that. We must serve when it's needed and not just when it is convenient on that. And so again, our service is simply serving Jesus by serving the needs of one another. If one is going to be a good servant, he pays attention to what is needed. A good servant doesn't have to be asked, doesn't have to be told, doesn't have to be pointed out what his job as a servant is to do. A good servant is looking around and seeing, what can I do for my master's benefit? What can I do to help through this? And Paul said in Galatians 6, as we have opportunity, let us do good unto all men. But I like that first part. It's not just the doing of good, but where we fail is we have to do it as we have opportunity. We don't have opportunities all the time for everybody, and we have different abilities. You know, some of you men are not song leaders. You've told me that. Okay. Some of you are not. Well, we have different abilities. We have different inclinations. We have different personalities. But as we have opportunity, when it presents ourselves, you can't be too busy. Now you do it. You either serve or you're not a servant. You're either too good to serve, and thus you're not a servant. Proverbs chapter 3 said, do not say to your neighbor, go and come again tomorrow. Why not? They have a need today. They need it today. Today is when the need has presented itself. And as we then have opportunity, we serve one another. That means we have to watch. We have to pay attention. We have to know each other. We have to get to see. We need to be aware. For example, when somebody begins missing services, or all of a sudden we find out they've been in the hospital for 3 weeks and nothing has been said and nobody has noticed and nobody's gone. Those things should not happen. They do, but they should not happen. We need to be aware. We need to be involved. When I first moved to Tucson, the elders asked me to go see this fellow that was in the hospital. And I went to see him, and I recognized I didn't know him. I had been there for a while, and I had never seen him. I looked in the directory, and his name was in the directory, but he was never there. And I asked him one time, I said, "Why don't you come to Bible class?" He said, "Because I don't get anything out of it." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I already know all that stuff." And my next question was this: then why aren't you teaching it? If you already know all of that, then sign up and be one of the teachers and help out with that. That is the idea of serving. Don't stay home, but come. Be involved in the congregation. Be involved with one another. That's messy business, but that is what serving is all about. You will be involved in other people's messes and their needs and their problems on that. So, and I'm going to come back to this at the end. One of the questions to always ask yourself is this: whom did I serve this week? And then you ask the next question: what did I do? And if you can't answer both of those questions, maybe we need to be more aware, to be more proactive in serving of that. And so as you have opportunity, do good, but that means to do it now. No excuses. No procrastination. Somebody posted on Facebook the other day, "I am a pro at crastination." And the funny part about that is I know the man, and he is absolutely right. Why put off till tomorrow what you can put off for a week or a month? And we cannot put it off. We need to do it now, because now is the circumstances of that. Ecclesiastes 11, the writer said, "He who observes for the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap." If you put it off, there will be another reason tomorrow not to do it. And there will be another reason the next day not to do that. In our meeting with Hal, he alluded to a story about Mark Twain. One of my favorite stories, so you're going to hear it again. Except I think he told it wrong, so I'm going to change it back to the way I understand. The fellow came and said, "I need to borrow your hammer." And Mark Twain said, I can't loan it to you." "Why not?" "My dog died." "What's your hammer got to do with your dog dying?" And he said, if you don't want to do something, one excuse is just as good as another. And so you go back to Proverbs, there's a lion in the street. And there may have been at one time, but this was just an excuse. There might be a lion in the street, and one excuse is just as good as another, except to the Lord. There is no excuse for us not serving one another. So we don't make the exceptions to that. And as we begin serving this, one of the excuses that we often make to excuse ourselves from having to do it, to excuse ourselves so we don't even try to do that, is, "I'm not very good at that." Okay, but do the best you can. Do what you can do. And so it's not about being the best at whatever you're doing. It's about serving one another. It's about jumping in and seeing if you can alleviate the problem that is there. Jesus told the parable of the talents. And by the way, You all notice, and Brandon talked about that this morning. The idea of a talent was not a talent, but it was money. It was a measure of money. But I'm going to tell you what, you might as well, for our purposes, it's a talent. You have an ability, a talent to do something. But we all have different talents on that. And different abilities make different opportunities. And opportunities make responsibilities. And the responsibility is do what you can do. Remember when God called Moses? And Moses said, I can't do that. I'm not any good at talking. And God then solved the problem. And every time Moses kept bringing up all of the things, I can't do that, I'm not able to do it. And God solved the problem over it. And the question that preachers like that God asked Moses is, Moses, what's that in your hand? And Moses took his staff and he threw it down on the ground as God instructed, and it turned into a snake. And then God said, now pick it up. And I guarantee most of us would have said, I don't think so. But Moses did. He did have ability. He had courage. He had a willingness to trust God. He was willing to obey. That is the best ability that any of us can have. And so Moses became one of the greatest leaders among them. And over in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9, when he was talking about the contribution, what he said was that everybody is supposed to make a contribution as he has prospered. And we prosper differently. Some of our friends make good money. I was just telling the baseball player from Japan. He pitches and he plays at the same time and hits almost 60 home runs. And he's winning. And the other day he did what's not done. He struck out 10. He pitched 6 scoreless innings and hit 3 home runs in the same ballgame. And you know what they pay him? $700 million. Now that's a 10-year contract, but that's pretty good pocket change. Now, if he was a Christian, how much should he give? I don't know. And it's not for you to decide. That's for him to decide what he's going to give. But as we look about, I'm supposed to give and you're supposed to give and I'm supposed to serve as the opportunity presents itself. So Jesus told yet another one of my favorite parables, the story as they were in the temple area and they had a community chest that was used. You put money in there and then the priest distributed that to the poor people that needed to have that money. And in walked a wretchedly poor widow. And she didn't have much money. And what little bit of money she had, and we don't have a way of really coordinating what that's worth, but the best I can give you is worth about a penny. And with her penny, she came and put it into the collection box to share that penny with other people. And I love what Jesus said. She put more into that box than everybody else, because she took that penny out of her very living, her livelihood, and shared it. And you can do that. It's not the amount, it's the willingness to share what we have. That. So we do the best that we have with what we do have and with the opportunity. And when we set out to do whatever service it is, we set out to do the best job that I can do with that. How many of you had fathers or mothers that said, a job worth doing is worth doing well? Y'all heard that. You know where they heard that? Their mom and dad. And their mom and dad. And we've been telling each generation that if you're going to do a job, don't do it halfway. Don't do it carelessly. If it's worth your time, do the best that you can do. Paul said, whatever you do it heartily, with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your ability that you can muster up, as if you were doing it to Jesus Himself and not unto men. And if you're going to do that, what that means is, it's not just the big jobs that you do heartily, it's the little jobs. Can you imagine grabbing the water basin and just dumping it on Peter's feet and throwing a towel towards him? Well, that's one way, but that's not the way Jesus did it. Jesus got down and took the feet, and He washed the feet, and He took the towel and He dried their feet. He did the job in a way that needed to be done. Do it the best that you can do. And what Jesus then said was, I've given you an example, go and do. And that's why I said it was not an example of doing a religious ceremony. It was an example of seeing a need and being willing to serve that need. 1 Peter chapter 4. Peter said, as each one of you has received a special gift, employ it to the serving of one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Brandon talked about this the other day, the idea of being a steward. A steward, or was that you, Jeff? Whichever. One of us talked about it the other day. And what that simply means is, you're in charge of taking care of somebody else's stuff. And I'm going to take care of somebody else's stuff to the best of my ability, as if it was my stuff. And so we are to be stewards of the very gift that God has given. I love Deuteronomy, where they were bragging about how they did this and they did that. And God reminded them, even the ability to work is a gift I've given to you. You didn't earn it yourself. You didn't build it. Remember the presidential debates, and I built this and that. No. God gave us the ability to serve one another. So whosoever speaks, let him do as if he's speaking the very utterances of God. And whosoever serves is to do so as one who's serving by the strength which God supplies. God gave us the ability to live and move and breathe and serve one another. And if you're going to be a steward, it is required of a slave, it is required of a steward that they will actually be faithful to their service. Faithfulness. You can be trusted. I don't know that we ever use the word that way, but you can be a trustee. People can trust and have confidence in you. You tell somebody, I'm going to do this, then go do it. You're going to be there, then unless you have extenuating circumstances that you can't, you're going to be there. And so as we begin looking at this, if we are stewards and if we are slaves that are serving, we can be counted on. God can count on you. Your brethren can count on you. Do you know what it's going to be like? Day of judgment? Walking up and Jesus is going to look at you and say, well done, you good and faithful servant. Enter the joys that have been prepared for you. But if you have not been doing it well, or not serving at all, He cannot say that to us. And so we serve as we are serving the Lord. And you know, we had problems. I've told people this. I'd go hold meetings and I'd come back, and I told the brethren in Tucson for 40 years, we have problems, but I like our problems better than their problems. And that was always true and allowed me to stay. And so I know we have problems, but I'm going to tell you what, our problems are better than most problems in every other congregation that you may ever be associated with. And so it doesn't mean we don't have them. But the one problem that we really had for many years in many churches is we made a list or we gave an assignment and they didn't show up. Jim puts out a little list. all of you men. And Jeff and I grab that list every week, and we go and we make sure and we check. And I'm going to tell you what, we're very seldom disappointed. Almost always when I say, you have the opening prayer, they go, yes, I know. And that's great. They not only know, but they're here to do it. And they're willing to take their position to do what we can with that. But many organizations, politics, churches, social, it doesn't matter. People don't show up. They're not faithful. You can't trust them. You can't count on them doing what they promised that they were going to do. They don't like to think about it this way, but I always think, you lied to me again. You said you're going to be there and you're not there. What else can we call that? And then, if we're going to be the type of servant that Jesus wants us to be, then we have to do, even as Matthew talked about in his prayer, we have to be humble and lowly. As we sang in the song, we have to be humble and lowly. We cannot promote self. Being a servant is not about me. It's not even about being known as a great servant. You ought to be able to do that where nobody gets any credit for it. They don't even know you did it. That is the greatest serving that you can do. And so it is not about impressing others or getting recognition for that. We do it for the glory of God. Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, beginning of the sermon, Jesus said, "Let your light shine before men so that they see your good works and glorify God." Whatever you do, particularly in any religious capacity, do it for the glory of God. Use your body, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6, to glorify God. Whatever we do, so that God Himself will be glorified. One of the greatest recognitions of Christianity and service was made by the unbelievers in the Roman Empire when a great plague hit the city of Rome. And the people were dying. And people that had any money, they fled. They took their money and they went where there was no plague. And you know who stayed and took care of the people? It was Christians. It wasn't an organization. It was not it was Christians. Neighborly. Taking care of the neighbor that's family had abandoned him. And they would walk in and they would take care of him. And you all realize what that meant? We did this with COVID. If somebody had COVID, would you help? Would you go and move in and take care of them and change the bedding, sit next to them and see what they needed? And the answer is, not if you want to stay healthy. But if you want to serve, that's a different matter. Are you willing to serve in such a way that you simply may get no recognition whatsoever for that? But God knows what we did. Peter said that the younger men, and the Bible recognizes what we all recognize, younger people strive to be noticed and popular and to have a reputation. Older people do the same thing. Younger people are just better at it than the rest of us. But that's not what God wants out of the young people or the old people. And so he said the younger people are to be subject unto the elders, clothing themselves. And elders, by the way, doesn't mean elder, it means old. The older people, the people that are older than you. And clothe yourself with that and humility towards one another, because God opposes the proud. That's a scary thought. As we're striving to be the greatest among the apostles, God was opposed to it. God did not want that. God did not desire that. Church splits that have come over power struggles, God hates that. And the person that does that course of action will be judged of God. And so he says, slaves, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters. That's how that works in a slave-master relationship. But now notice, when Paul uses this, not just of the literal physical slave, but he applies it to us as Christians. We are to serve one another not with eye service, as people pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. Doing it because God wants you to do it. And God wants us to take care of one another and to serve one another. And so, I asked Jeff to lead this song. Make me a servant. Take all my pride. I want to be, I would be, lowly, humble on the inside that shows on the out, giving to others with all that I do, in love with my brother. Make me like you. Would you have washed Judas's feet? Would you have washed Peter's feet? You know, they wouldn't even wash Jesus' feet, because that would have... What a shame. Would we have served one another? Brethren, this is to remind you, we are serving. Let us keep it up, and let us learn to do even better than we're doing now. That's all that the Lord really wants. Let us be servants. Are you a servant of the Lord? What'd you do? Who'd you do it to? That's the questions that we ask. So you need to become a servant today. And you start by obeying Jesus. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. And that makes you a servant of God's people. And if you're willing to do that, we invite you to come as we stand and as we sing.